Hi readers, this is another virtual read aloud for you. And this one I'm particularly excited about because it's going to set us up for our next unit, our first official unit in fact. We've been studying our identities and we've been thinking about the ways in which our reading life is affected by our identities, who we are. We've talked a bit about how we bring so much to every story. We bring our own stories to every story. And it really is important for us to think about this because it helps us to not only see more in texts, but to learn more and to take away more as we move on into the world and become members of society. So we've been doing some of that metacognitive thinking, the thinking about our thinking. And now I want us to get super rooted in some of the really meaty work of reading, especially in reading fiction. I want us to get back to story elements and thinking about how we can lift the level of our thinking work as sixth graders. So our first official unit, which is going to be coming up very soon, is called A Deep Study of Character. And in this unit, we will read a variety of texts. But one of the first texts we're going to read today is coming from a collection of short stories called French Kiss and Other Traumas, written by Adam Bajasarian. We're going to read a few stories from this. And I think that it's important for you to know that every story in this collection has a main character named Will. So we're going to get to know Will really well, which is pretty convenient for our work because our work, this unit, studying characters, a deep study. So we hopefully will get to know Will very well, practicing all the skills and strategies that we're going to be acquiring along the way. So before we jump right into our first official read aloud for the unit, I want just to take a second to do some deep thinking work about our reading. I've asked you already in class to practice making plans for your reading. But we've been making some pretty big plans, like what do we want to read, or how will we find texts to read that we like, that will inspire us? Those are some pretty lofty plans. And you want to have plans that are a big picture about your reading life, but you also want to have daily plans, daily reading plans. Because readers plan their thinking work every time they sit down to read. It's important for them to do this so that they can make the most of their reading time. They ask themselves, what sort of work will I be doing today? Often it helps to think about, well, what kind of a text will they be reading? Like, we'll be reading a short story. And also maybe where are they in the text? We'll be at the beginning, starting for the very, very first time. So now I want to ask you a question. When you typically read, perhaps a short story or any story, and you are starting at the very beginning, what are the kinds of things your mind goes to first? Or maybe what do you remember from other grades? What should you be looking at and focusing on when you're starting a story for the very first time? Think for a second, maybe jot it down. What do you do when you first start a story? Maybe this chart's familiar. Here's some of our story elements. What are some things that readers pay attention to at the very beginning? Take a look at this chart. What could it be? If you're near a person, a cat, a dog, an animal, a fish, a window, a neighbor, tell them. I'm gonna do it right now, I'll practice. Let's talk to my window. Whenever I read stories, I usually am trying to figure out right away what the characters are like. I'm also paying attention to the setting too. I'm talking to my wall, but really it's the window, so maybe my neighbors outside can hear me. Talk to someone, say something out loud, get some conversation going. Yes, maybe we're doing this independently, but that doesn't mean their thoughts have to be totally insular. Say something, write something, draw something. So whenever we're starting stories, I think it's pretty fair to say that the first thing that our eyes might go to is setting details, but the biggest, most important thing to be thinking about from the very beginning, especially in a short story where the beginnings happen really fast, characters. And remember, Unit's all about that. So that could have been maybe a little hint. Characters, that's the big work you want to do. Characters are super important to stories because they're usually the ones who are carrying the message. We watch them from the beginning to the middle to the end, face obstacles, overcome challenges, and eventually learn lessons that we as readers can take away and apply to our own lives. So at the very beginning, we need to get to know those characters well so that we can learn from them fast and deeply. So the very beginning of the character, I like to notice the character, what they, kind of the stuff that they say and do, and I like to ask myself pretty early on, what kind of a character is this? Another little reminder from previous grades is that the way that you learn about characters, the way that you get to know them, is by looking at really specific kinds of details. Details that reveal character traits, and character feelings. So when we get started today, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Let me just say my plan out loud to you, and you can do the same thing later on today when you go off to read as well. Say your plan to yourself. It helps you stick to it. When I go off to read today, I'm going to be thinking about characters because I'm in the beginning of a story. I'm going to do this by paying close attention to characters' traits and their feelings, and then asking myself, what kind of a character is this? Okay, it's my plan. Let's do it. Let's get started. So I'm going to start reading, but just so you know where you can find this text to follow along, it's on the Padlet that's listed for you on Google Classroom. So if you want to pull out the text as well to have it on hand, that might be a really good place to go. Google Classroom, and then click the Padlet, and that will bring you right to our story. Okay, this short story is called My Side of the Story by Adam Bajasarian. I was sitting at my desk in my bedroom practicing my signature when my brother came in and asked me if I wanted to throw the ball around or shoot baskets. No, I said. So he looked over my shoulder at my signatures, went into the bathroom for a few seconds, came out, went to his desk, unraveled an entire roll of Scotch tape, and stuck it on my head. Naturally, I was outraged. What did you do that for? I asked. It was a stupid question because I knew very well why he had done it. He had done it for the same reason he had stuffed me in a laundry hamper and tied me to a chair with my best ties. He had done it because he was 14 and had the great good fortune to be blessed with a little brother he could bedevil at will. Try to get it off, he said. This I attempted to do, but he had rubbed the Scotch tape so hard into my scalp that it had become part of my head. Let me try, he said. So he tried, and I yelled, and he stopped. Then he gently pulled a piece of the Scotch tape off the side of my head, along with 6 or 7 of my temple hairs. Even at the age of 9, I knew that I had been mightily wronged. Even at 9, I knew that this violated every code of justice and fair play that I had ever been taught. And so, my heart full of righteous rage, indignation, I leaped out of my chair, past my brother, in search of justice. I'm going to pause there for a second. I'm going to go back to my chart. Let's think. What are we noticing about the character? What kind of a character is this so far? Maybe I need to go back and look and see what details come up that could show traits and feelings. Let me just start with what my hunch says. My hunch, like things that's in my gut. I feel like this character, what's sticking out to me the most is just like the tone of voice. He seems like mad, doesn't he? Frustrated, angry. Let's go back and see. Are there any particular, like specific details that really reveal that maybe I should highlight or take note of? I'm just gonna scan across. Naturally, I was outraged. That definitely feels significant. I'm gonna highlight that. I'm also going to make a note on the side what I'm thinking about it. So I can remember. So you might see how I'm annotating this text in the Google Doc. You can do the same thing when you open this up on your end. Just because we don't have physical pieces of paper and text right now doesn't mean that we can't do the same kind of work we've always done, marking up a text, color coding it. No, you're going to see me do the same thing right here. Just going to look a little bit different, feel a little bit different. Okay, any other details like that? Let's see. I knew I had been mightily wronged. It kind of sounds similar, that like outrage, that voice. Super mad about his brother, but not just today. Always. It just seems like he's been mad at him for a really long time. Okay. Any traits so far? So any ways that I could describe the kind of character or person he is? I mean, he seems like he's just kind of like a angry person, but I don't really know yet. I only know him a little bit. So I'm going to read on and see what other details come up that could help me really latch on to a character trait. Because right now he sounds mad, but maybe this is just like a fleeting moment of anger, because we know that mad is a feeling, it's an emotion. So if he's mad all the time, maybe I'll see that as I continue to read on, but I don't want to commit to it just yet because this is just the beginning. I have to read on and see if I can confirm this. So help me do this. Let's keep going. In those days, Justice looked a good deal like my mother. I wonder what he means by that. It had lovely brown hair, a warm, enchanting smile, and a soft, understanding voice. Okay, so it's not like he's mad at everyone. He's just mad at his brother. So I'm glad I waited to say that he's a mad person. Let me keep going and see. Sounds like he has some nice things to say about other people. It was comforting to know that in a matter of seconds, my mother would hear the evidence, weigh the evidence, and punish my brother. Generally, things were murkier. Generally, I did something by accident, and my brother did something back, I did something back, and on until it was impossible to tell who was at fault. But this was the case of a lifetime. And the best part of all was that the evidence was stuck on my head. When I reached my mother's room, I saw that the door was closed. For a moment, I hesitated, wondering if she was sleeping. But I was so sure of my case, so convinced of the general rightness of my mission, that I threw open the door and burst into the room screaming, "Mom, Skip put." I'm going to pause there for a second. Whenever I'm trying to figure out what a character is really like, I'm looking for things that come up a few times. So let me just think for a second. What seems to be true so far? He's mad, right? He seems to be mad. He also seems to be like really concerned with justice. He mentions it a lot. For instance, he mentions it for the first time. Let's see where he mentions it for the first time. Back of the same detail, I knew I had been mightily wronged. Even at the age of 9, I knew that this was violating every code of justice and fair play. This seems like maybe leading to a trait, so I'm gonna pick another color. Let's go with pink. So I'm gonna say, he seems like the kind of character who is concerned with things being fair, justice. Let's see, there's more to this. Let's see. He compared his mother to justice, like, and his mother's really seems like kind and beautiful. So maybe like I definitely can tell that he thinks of justice as being a really good thing. And then when he goes seeking justice, he seems like he gets pretty mad again. He's screaming, so convinced of the general righteousness in that mission. So he definitely seems like a he seems like a person that is frustrated. Let's see, maybe I can develop this a bit more. He seems like the kind of person, he seems like the kind of person. Well, I mean, it sounds like he just holds on to anger because he just keeps like listing all these things that his brother has done to him that are wrong. It's like he can't let anything go. I could right now look up a fancy word for that, but I'm just going to tell you the word I'm thinking of is resentful. Seems like the kind of person, he seems like a resentful person, a person that holds on to anger for a long time. Seems like he just holds on to stuff and he's like, I was like keeping tabs on his brother. So let me just stop there for a second and recap what I've done so far. I've read thinking deeply about what details are telling me stuff about the character. And as I've been reading, I've been thinking about traits and feelings, little clues that point me toward a feeling, and definitely gathering as many clues as possible to help me develop an idea for a trait. Do you see how by looking at really small details, like the kinds of words someone uses, the kinds of actions they take? For instance, like over here, I was really drawn to this part because he like thrusts into her room. He screams. Also, I'm thinking about the kind of details, like all these like inner dialogue, like his memories. So he like the kind of words he uses to describe stuff. You can tell that he's like resentful and angry person. All of his memories are kind of angry, tacking up all these bad moments of his life. So all these really small details that the author puts in are clues to help me figure out what kind of a person this is. So this time as I read on, I'm going to be thinking about my theory that he's a resentful person. I'm still not convinced. I don't want to be convinced of anything quite yet. But I'm going to be reading on to see now that I'm a little bit further into the story. Are these details sticking? Can I confirm this? Or are there going to be new details that maybe go against it? Is this character trait that I'm thinking of, resentful, angry, frustrated person, is this going to hold true? Will you help me with this? As I read on, you can start making some jots too about what kind of a person this is and how the next part of the text fits or doesn't fit. So now I'll start looking to see like, does this next section fit? All right, so I'm hoping that on your end, you've already taken some jots, taken some notes about the kind of persons that you think he is. And so now you're going to help me out by taking some jots about whether or not the details hold true. Let's keep going. And then I realized that I was talking to my father, not my mother. In order to understand the enormity of the mistake I had made, you have to understand my father. My father was 5 feet 7.5 inches tall, stocky, powerfully built, and larger than life in laughter, strength, character, integrity, humor, appetite, wit, insight, and rage. I love how he keeps using this word rage. I want to just highlight it. Like this word, he says he's filled with rage in the beginning. I'm just noticing this word. It's a feeling, right? Rage. I'm gonna go back to that green feeling. He constantly talks about rage. Consequently, he was not concerned with the little things in life, such as sibling shenanigans, rivalries, or disputes. His job, as he saw it, was to make us the best human beings we could possibly be, to guide us, love us, and teach us the large laws of honor, courage, honesty, and self-reliance. I don't know about you, but I'm starting to realize or starting to notice the way that this character talks, it's not just all anger. It's almost like he has this like edge to him. Like he's kind of making fun of everyone. Like he's making fun of his brother, even when he's talking about him before. Like up here he says, it was a stupid question because I knew very well why he had done it. He had done it for the same reason he had stuck me in the laundry hamper. He had done it because he had the great good fortune of being blessed with a little brother he could bedevil at will. So he's like making fun of like how like his brother just decides to be mean to him just because he can. He's like making fun of his dad for being like a nice person. That kind of a person that makes fun of other people, that has like a little bit of edge to it, that kind of a person is a sarcastic person. I'm gonna highlight this because this is what made me think it. I'm gonna do green again because again it's a theory on the traits. What is making me think that he is a sarcastic? He's mad at everyone, but also isn't so mad that he can't make fun of them. I'm also starting to have some questions. Maybe you are too. Maybe in your next jot, you can write something down like a prediction or a wondering. I wonder if his sarcasm will become a problem, like in other relationships. I know that as kids, like in my family, I'm very not sarcastic. I'm like the enthusiast, I'm like pretty positive. My siblings, on the other hand, are pretty sarcastic. One thing that's been hard for us as siblings is that sometimes they'll make fun of me in like a joking way, like they're frustrated with me, but they kind of joke about it, sarcasm. But sometimes in the moment, I can't really tell that they're being sarcastic, and then I get really upset and I feel like they hate me, and I feel self-conscious. And I think that this happens sometimes with other people who are sarcastic. Like sometimes, if you're sarcastic, not everyone understands what you mean, or they take you really seriously when really it's just like a little jab rather than like a giant punch to the gut. So I'm wondering if like this sarcasm is going to be a problem with friends or with other parts of his life. Do you see how now I'm not just noticing about the things about the character? I'm starting to like get stuff together to build and grow theories. I'm looking across the text. I'm going back to the beginning. I'm putting pieces together to see like what kind of a person is this and what big ideas do I have about this character and how this character fits into the story. So as I go from beginning to middle to end of the story, I'm taking little bits, stacking them up, and building a theory, an idea. So I'm going to keep going and seeing if I can continue to add on to my theory about his sarcasm. But I'm also going to search for other elements or other parts of my theory. Like, for instance, does it cause problems? Does it affect their relationships? So I'm going to be looking for new details now, details that add on to this other part, details that maybe will be different. Maybe you can help me do this with your next job. Maybe you can test out this theory with me, looking for details that either confirm or deny that sarcasm is a problem for him. He was the only man to turn to if you had a severed artery, broken ribs, or any serious disease or financial problems. But he was not the kind of man who would knowingly burst in upon screaming anything less than, "The house is on fire," or "Somebody stole your car." I knew this, of course, which is why I had run to my mother's room in the first place, and why when I saw my father, most of the color drained from my face. My first impulse was to walk backward out of the room, closing the door gently before me as I did so, but I had shifted so suddenly from my offensive indignation to defensive fear and astonishment that I felt a little disoriented. Okay, so this character that I kind of thought was like all confident all the time, like in his feelings and his rage, definitely feels like he can get off balance. I'll keep reading to see what this is all about. For a moment, I considered telling him that I smelled a smoke or saw someone stealing his car, but I couldn't lie. I couldn't tell the truth either. In fact, for a moment, I couldn't speak. What the hell are you doing? My father said. I started to say, I was sitting at my desk minding my own business when, and then I stopped. I stopped because I knew instinctively that scotch tape on my head was not enough, not nearly enough to warrant my wild, unannounced entrance into his room. When? What? Nothing. You run in here screaming about something. What happened? You didn't what? I didn't know you were here. So what? You knew someone was here. What did Skip do? Skip, I was sitting at my desk and Skip what? Tell me. Put scotch tape on my head. This apparently was all my father needed to set the wheels of his anger in motion. You come running in here without knocking because Skip put scotch tape on your head? No, you don't care that the door was closed? You didn't care that your mother might have been sleeping? I wanted to explain to him that this had been going on for years, that Mom and Skip and I had an understanding, but I knew that we weren't having a discussion. I knew that he was working himself into a rage and that anything I said would only make it worse. Right now, take a second to jot something down in your Google Keep on a Post-it, something that you could share with me. What are you thinking about this character? This character seems kind of complicated. I mean, at first, he seemed kind of confident in his thinking, like, believes in justice. That's all he really cares about, justice, being treated fairly, fairness. But then, he easily weakens. I wonder what it is. Like, what is it about his dad, or what is dad saying that makes him kind of like fall apart? Could you right now write a jot that addresses that? How is this character complicated? You might say things like, at first I thought, but now I'm realizing. On the one hand, Will is, but on the other hand, he's. Take a second to jot. If you need a thought prompt, check our Padlet, and then come back to this read aloud for the end. We're still thinking about our theory of sarcasm. What challenges does this pose for our character? What are we supposed to be learning about our character and about life? Big stuff. Let's keep going. I wanted to explain to him that this had been going on for years, that Mom and Skip and I had an understanding, but I knew that we weren't having a discussion. I knew that he was working himself into a rage. Again, that word rage. It's like all about rage. It's not highlighting things. It just keeps coming up. Rage. Do you see how when I notice patterns, whether they be in the actions or the thoughts, the feelings the character does, I take note of them. And they help me to maybe develop a theory or an idea. Like every time he talks about his brother or he talks about justice, he gets all like kind of like sarcasmy and jabby. And I also am noticing just other patterns, like the same word coming up over and over again. Because something that's also really important about studying a text, any text, is that readers are on the lookout for clues. Also, clues can take the shape of patterns. When something happens over and over again, we know it's probably important. We know we should be zooming in and paying attention. It's probably going to lead us to a big idea that the author wants us to take away. So what's this rage thing all about? Why does it keep coming up? Let's see. Is this what you do? You run into rooms screaming? He was on his feet now and advancing toward me. You don't knock? No, yes. At this point, my brother entered the room, saw what was happening, and stood transfixed. Here, my father said, here's what we do with scotch tape. And with that, he pulled the whole wad off my head, along with 50 or 60 of my hairs. I knew he was only a few seconds away from his closing arguments now, and my calculations were just about right. You don't, whop, ever, whop, come in, whop, without knocking. Do you hear me? Silence, whop. Do you hear? At this point, I heard a squeeze of escaping laughter where my brother was standing and saw him run out of the room. Do you? Yes, Pop. Yes, I hear you. Are you ever going to come in here without knocking again? No, no. Ever? No. Now get out of here. and I got out and heard the door slam behind me. There was not much to do after that but sit at my desk and wonder what had happened. I had been signing my name. Skip put Scotch tape on my head. I ran to tell Mom, found Pop, and the lights went out. Where I wondered, was the justice in that? Obviously, when I burst into my mother's room, I had entered a larger world of justice, a world where screaming, whining, and mother dependence, not knocking on closed doors, and startling one's father were serious crimes. That part I understood. The part I didn't understand was the part about my brother, who had started the whole thing by putting Scotch tape on my head, hadn't been punished. So in the interest of a smaller justice, I went over to his trophies and gradually wrested the little gold-plated athlete off its mount. With a little luck, my brother would want to tell Pop about it. Did you notice another pattern in the words the author uses? Justice. It comes up all the time. I've heard that word justice a lot. Also punish. Like he's obsessed with someone getting a punishment. Unfortunately, this time it was for him, but he wanted his brother to get punished. That's what he sought out to do in the first place, right? So now I'm thinking, and maybe you're thinking too, what do we learn about the character? What kind of a character is this? Is it still the same from the beginning? Is that angry, sarcastic person the same person that you see now? Could you say that's true from start to finish? For your jot that you're going to submit to me, I want you to reflect on this. I want you to ask yourself the question and really think deeply. What kind of character is this? How do I know? And I want you to try to use details from the text. Perhaps thinking about little hints that show his traits. I want you also to remember that characters maybe grow across the story. So think across the story. And double check to make sure that your final thoughts that you're submitting hold true in the beginning, the middle, and the end. What kind of a character is this? How do you know? Make sure that it holds true from the beginning to the middle to the end. Maybe he is just a sarcastic guy. Maybe he is just resentful. What else is he? Is he more than that? I mentioned before that he's complicated. Remember, characters can be more than one way, just like how you and I are more than one way. More to come. Such an exciting unit, friends. Go on to keep.google.com. Just a friendly reminder. Keep.google.com. Write your jot. Entail it side of the story. And then write your thinking and send it off to me, my email. I hope that you have more than one jot at this point, or that you'd submit maybe a series of jots at once, because I'm going to be looking to see that you were thinking all the way through, and you have a fairly decent amount of writing about reading at the end. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Can't wait to see what you do.